Today we are moving on to Chapter 9. We are going to continue talking about quadratic equations. And then when we have a quadratic equation, it's going to be written in the form, it's called standard form. And you guys have seen this before. It's going to be y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So this is a quadratic equation written in standard form. When we graph a quadratic equation, it's going to create a U-shaped curve, and is going to be called a parabola. And that parabola is going to look either like this, opening upward, or the opposite, opening downward. So it's going to create that nice U shape. And when we look at the types of parabola, this says to use your graphing calculator to sketch the following. We don't have graphing calculators, so I'm going to go over these two examples with you. But first thing, if we have our a term, so it's that first number that comes before the x squared, is positive, then the parabola is going to open up like a smile. So looking at this first example, we have y equals x squared plus 2x minus 5. Before that x squared, we have a positive 1 there, so the graph of this equation is going to open upward. Then we have the opposite. If our a is negative, then the parabola is going to open downward like a frown. So looking at our second example, we have y equals negative x squared plus 3x plus 7. Before that x squared is a negative 1, so that means that this one is going to open downward. It's going to create that frown. Alright, so we're going to create some sketches of our parabolas today, given some equations, and I'm going to go through the steps now of how you're going to do that. So the very first thing you're going to do is figure out what the axis of symmetry is. An axis of symmetry for a parabola is going to be the vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. So if I have a parabola and it's opening upward like this, it's going to be that line that cuts through the middle. So in this case it would be that y-axis, that if I took my parabola and I folded it in half, it would be the same on both sides. So it's kind of like a taco. And when we're solving for our axis of symmetry, we have a formula. It's going to be x equals negative b over 2a, where b is going to be that second term in our equation. So we have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c as a friendly reminder. So this b is going to be the number that comes before x, and then a is going to be the number that comes before x squared. So if we look at example 1, we have y equals x squared plus 2x minus 5. If we want to find our axis of symmetry, it's going to be x equals negative b. In this case, b is 2, the number before x, so I'm going to have negative 2 divided by 2 times a. So I'm going to have 2 times, in this case, my a is 1, so 2 times 1. And I'm just going to solve this. So I have negative 2 divided by 2 times 1. So in the denominator, this is just 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is going to give me negative 1. So my axis of symmetry for this problem is going to be at x equals negative 1. So we're going to go ahead and draw that vertical line in. So if it's at x is negative 1, I'm going to start at my origin, go to negative 1, plot a point, and then draw in, I'm going to make this a dotted vertical line. So that's going to be the center line for our parabola. So if we fold it in half on x equals negative 1, it's going to be the same on both sides. Next step, we are going to locate our vertex. So the vertex is the turning point of the parabola. So when the vertex is at the lowest point, so if we have a parabola that's opening upward, that lowest point there is going to be called our minimum. If we have a vertex at the highest point, so if it's opening downward, this point here is going to be our vertex, that's that highest point. It's going to be called the maximum. In order to find our vertex, we first want to find our axis of symmetry. So for this first one, we found it was x equals negative 1. We are going to take that axis of symmetry and plug it into our equation. So we're going to plug negative 1 in for x in our equation. So if our equation is y equals x squared plus 2x minus 5, we're going to plug negative 1 in here and plug negative 1 in here. Solve for y. So it'll be y equals negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 5. And then we're just solving this for y. So negative 1 squared is going to give me positive 1. Then I have plus 2 times negative 1 makes this negative 2 and minus 5. 1 plus negative 2 is going to give me negative 1. Negative 1 minus 5 leaves me with y equals negative 6. So for this one here, this problem, my vertex is going to be at the point negative 1, my x-coordinate, negative 6, my y-coordinate. Then you're going to go to your graph and we're going to plot that point. So I'm going to do my y-axis by 2's. So negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, 2, 4, 6. And I'm going to go to negative 1, negative 6. So negative 1, negative 6, plot a point. That is my vertex. And then I know that this graph is going to open upward because my a value is positive. So I'm going to create that nice U shape with arrows on the end. We are going to go over number 1 together. So I have the equation y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. So in this equation, I have my a value. It's going to come before the x squared, so that's going to be a positive 1. B is going to come before that x, so it's going to be a positive 8. And c is going to be that last term, so c is going to be 15. I also know from looking at this equation that my a value is going to be a positive, so that means that this graph is going to open upward. So for this problem, our first step, we need to figure out what our axis of symmetry is. And in order to find out our axis of symmetry, we have our formula here. X equals negative b over 2a. So finding that axis of symmetry is going to be x equals negative b. We know our b is 8, so it's going to be negative 8 divided by 2 times a, which is 1. So when we do this math out, I have negative 8 divided by 2 times 1, or negative 8 divided by 2. leaving me with -4. So my axis of symmetry is x equals -4. That's going to be that center line, that vertical center line for my parabola. Step 2, we're now going to go on and find our vertex. So in order to find our vertex, we need to take what we got for our axis of symmetry. We're going to take x equals -4 and we're plugging that into our equation for x. So I have y equals -4 squared plus 8 times -4 plus 15. Then I'm just going to solve this out. So order of operations. I have y equals -4 squared is going to give me a positive 16. Then I have positive 8 times -4 is going to give me -32. And then I have plus 15 at the end. So I have 16 minus 32, which is going to give me -16. -16 plus 15 is going to give me y equals -1. So our vertex we're going to write as an ordered pair. So what comes first in our ordered pair is going to be our x, and we know our x value is -4. And then second is going to come our y value, and we discovered that our y value for our vertex is going to be -1. So our vertex for this parabola is going to be -4, -1. Then our third step is going to be to create a sketch. And with this sketch, we are only labeling our axis of symmetry and our vertex. So I know that this parabola is going to open upward, we said, because my a value is positive. I'm going to have my axis of symmetry. It's going to be that vertical line down the center. So if I folded this parabola in half, it's going to be the same on both sides. So this is axis of symmetry at x equals -4. And then you're also going to label that vertex point and put the ordered pair, so -4, -1. And that's going to be our vertex. I'm going to go over one more example with you. So we're going to go over number 2 together, and then you guys are going to complete numbers 3 through 10. So 8 problems on your own. So again, first step. We have our equation, y equals -x squared plus 10x minus 23. And we need to find our axis of symmetry. So we're going to use our formula. X equals -b over 2a. So -b, my b value is going to be positive 10. So I'm going to have -10 divided by 2 times a. And in this case, my a is going to be a -1. So then doing the math out, I'm going to have -10 divided by 2 times -1, or -2. So -10 divided by -2 is going to give me a positive 5. So my axis of symmetry is going to be that vertical line, at x equals positive 5. Second step, I'm going to go on and figure out my vertex. And in order to figure out our vertex, we take our axis of symmetry, whatever we solve for x for, and we're plugging that into our equation for x. So I have y equals -5 squared plus 10 times 5 minus 23. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this. So 5 squared is going to be 25, but it's got that negative outside of it, so it's going to be -25 plus 10 times 5, which gives me 50, minus 23. So I'm going to take -25 plus 50 is going to give me positive 25, and then minus 23 is going to give me y equals positive 2. So when I write my vertex, I'm going to write it as an ordered pair. First digit is going to come first. It's going to be my x coordinate. So x is going to be positive 5, comma, my y coordinate, which we figured out was positive 2, close parentheses. Then step 3, we're going to create a sketch of this. So we know this parabola is going to open downward because our a value is a negative. So anytime our a value is a negative, that parabola is going to open downward. So I'm going to create that U facing downward without frown. I have my axis of symmetry at x equals 5. So that's going to be this vertical line coming down the middle. We want to label that axis of symmetry at x equals 5, and then we also want to add in our vertex. So the vertex is going to be that maximum point where it changes direction. And we're going to write in that ordered pair, so I have 5, 2, and I'm going to label that as my vertex. So for numbers 3 through 10, you have 8 more problems. Figure out what your axis of symmetry is using our formula. Plug that axis of symmetry into your equation to figure out your vertex, which is going to be an ordered pair, and then draw me a sketch with your axis of symmetry and your vertex both labeled.